It's a new episode of the Peak Signing Agents podcast and YouTube channel. Thanks for tuning in for another episode. My name is Derek Van Otten, DVO. I am your host for this episode, and I'm trying to help you become the best notary and signing agent that you can possibly be. And you know that, right? Anyway, on this episode, I thought I'd share a little tip. This is a tip I've just learned from doing multiple signings, thousands and thousands of signings, and I was just reminded of it because as I was talking to the person, I gave him this tip, and he said, "Oh, you must do this a lot." And I said, "Yes." And he said, "You must see all kinds of different things." I said, "That's right, I sure do." So I'm talking about tabletops, table surfaces. Maybe you don't think about this too much, but as someone like myself who's done thousands of signings, this is a tip I have for you to make sure that signatures and paperwork stay neat and organized. And this is a tip that I thought I'd share. I know this might be a smaller episode, a shorter episode, but I was just reminded when I was at a closing recently, and I thought I should actually share this with everybody. So why not? And again, we're talking about tabletops and surface tops because most likely you'll be signing at a table or a version of a table. As you do this long enough, you'll find out what I'm talking about, because it's not always going to be a nice kitchen table that's clean for us. We sign in all different places. So I want to share my tips with you. First thing is, when I call to confirm the appointment, I always verify a few things. So when I call, I'll start off with this. When I call and I'm talking to the signer, John and Jane Doe, let's say that they're the signers, and I call and only one of them answers, and I say, "Hi, John, my name is Derek. I'll be your notary coming over on Friday. I just wanted to introduce myself and confirm a few details. Do you have a quick minute?" I always say a quick minute just so they know it's literally going to take a quick minute. And they say, "Sure." I say, "Okay, first of all, I'm meeting with you and Jane." So I always confirm if there's going to be a second person. That way, hopefully, they'll communicate that with the other person. Our appointment's set for Friday at noon at this address. Is that correct? And once I've confirmed that and they say yes, but let's just say I only received John's name, I say, "Hi, John, my name is Derek. I'm just confirming our appointment. Now, they only give me your name. Are you the only one signing, or is there someone else on title?" And that way, if they give me another person's name, I can put that in my calendar and be prepared for that. But once I've confirmed the appointment, I say, "Great, I'll need a couple things from you and Jane. Have 2 forms of ID on hand." Now, I always say 2. Because most likely you don't have the paperwork and you don't know what the Patriot Act wants if this is going to be a borrower situation. If it's a sales situation, I always just say I need 1 form of ID. But if it's a borrower situation, I say please have 2 forms of ID on hand. I always say 2 to be safe. Sometimes we only need 1. Sometimes we need 2. But I will say a lot of times I will get is if I say, "Oh, you know what, it looks like we need 2 forms of ID." I've noticed some people, not all the time, but some people say, "Oh, I wish they would have told me. I don't have anything else on me." So I've always just said, "Hey, be prepared." I was a Boy Scout, so that was our motto: be prepared. So I would just say have 2 forms of ID on hand, and then if I only needed 1, then great, we've got 2. But I would say to have 2 forms of ID on hand, and we'll just need a clean table to sign at. So I would just kind of end with that. Now, just because I say it doesn't mean they have it ready, but I do say it every time. So we'll just need a clean table to sign all the paperwork at. And I do think it helps, just not all the time, but it doesn't hurt to say it anyway. So I always say that. Have a clean table ready. Then we get to the table, and sometimes it's not ready. So here's how I handle tabletop situations. We're dealing with 100, 150 pages, up to maybe 200 pages sometimes. So what have been my situations? You get there and They're a hoarder. Their table is cluttered with junk, mail and food and groceries. Sometimes it's disgusting. And I say, okay, great. Where should we sign at? Well, actually, when I get to the house, I knock on the door. They open the door. I say, hello, hi, my name is Derek. I'm your notary. And they say, hello, come on in. And you hold the door open for me. And I walk in. I just usually stop right at the end. As soon as I walk in, I stop and say, all right, I'll follow you to the table. That's always what I say. I'll follow you to the table. I'm always guiding them to the table. That's the most preferable place to sign when I'm at their home, is the table. The kitchen table, dining table, I don't care. We just need a table to sign at. It's going to be a lot easier to conduct the signing and be in control. So I let them guide me to the table. As we sit down, I'm always kind of surveying the table situation. I want to sit in a place where they can both see me, but we can reach each other as we're passing the paperwork back and forth. I'm explaining the page, they sign, they're passing it back. I want to be in a position where if, let's just say a common scenario is two people. I want to be in a situation where at least the three of us are in a good position to be passing paperwork around. So I'm always kind of I'm always surveying the table situation and chair situation. As we say, hopefully the table's clean, but a lot of times there's not. So the table's cluttered. So what I say is, okay, where can we free up some space so I can put all this paperwork out? So I'm kind of guiding them to kind of clean up their mess a little bit. Not necessarily clean up their mess, but at least I don't want to touch their stuff. Okay, that's what I'm getting to. I don't want to just start touching their stuff and moving their stuff. So I just say, where can we move some things around so we have some room here to sign the paperwork? And I make them kind of do that. I stay in control of the signing. I'm saying things in a way so that they know I need to clean up some space so we can sign this paperwork. Where can we move some things around so we can sign all this paperwork? All this paperwork. I'm kind of emphasizing there's a lot of paperwork here. It's not 1 or 2 pages. And people get so surprised when you pull out that stack of paper and they're like, we have to sign all of that. You've been there, right? So it happens. Yes, we need a place to sign all this paperwork. All right, let's just say the table's a little sticky. The kids ate breakfast in the morning. They haven't had time to clean up since then. Or the kids had lunch, didn't really clean up after themselves. The mom and dad just got home, noticed the table's a mess. And they say, oh my gosh, sorry, the table's a mess. This is what I say. Oh, no, not a problem. I don't mind waiting. I don't mind waiting if you need to clean it up. I don't mind. So again, I'm in control saying, yeah, you're going to have to kind of clean this up a little bit. That peanut butter and jelly stickiness is not good for the paperwork. So, not a problem. I have kids. I get it. I can wait. You want me to get a wet paper towel? Maybe I'll even offer, but they jump in right away. They're not having the notary clean their table. Okay, so they jump in right away and get that cleaned up. Sometimes when they clean up though, the table's still a little wet. I just use that stack of paperwork and kind of fan the table a little, help it air dry the table a little bit faster. Another thing that I do is when I pull out the paperwork, I have the paperwork they're going to sign and then the paperwork I'm giving them as a copy, and that's underneath. So it kind of helps. I put their copies underneath the copies that we're going to sign. So if anything's on the table that we didn't catch, we didn't notice anything on the table, we just didn't notice it or see it, their copies are going to be sticky or dirty. All right. And then the top page usually is going to be the FedEx UPS label. And as I flip that over, that's the top layer. I don't care if the FedEx UPS label get messy, right? It's just going into a pouch to get shipped. So those are kind of my barriers as well for the paperwork. So the bottom of the stack we're signing is their copies. So if that gets dirty, I don't care. And the top page that I flip over, as we flip over every page, is going to be the FedEx UPS label, the return label. And if that gets a little messy, I don't care about that shipping label. So those are my tips with that. What if we have to sign outside? Yeah, sometimes that can be a pain. Sometimes they want to meet somewhere and we're out at a table and it's a little dirty. Well, that's the scenario that I do to kind of help keep those barriers from the paperwork. There are copies on the bottom, the UPS FedEx label on top, and as I flip through the pages, they're pages that may get a little dirty. Now, here's the tip that gave me this idea for this episode. We're at a signing. We're at their kitchen table, and their kitchen table it's basically, I don't know why, there's a split down the middle. So I don't know if it's one of those tables that you can kind of separate to extend it longer. That could have been the situation where you can extend the table longer, or maybe it was two tables that they put together. I don't really know. But anyway, there's a crack right down the middle of the table. And as they were about to get ready to sign, they started signing, and I could tell the paperwork is over that crack. And I just, hey, just be careful of the crack down the middle. And he said, oh, you must have done this before. He's like, you've probably seen every situation. I said, yep, because what will happen, if you don't know, sometimes people have designs in their tables. And as they go to sign, they reach that little area of the table where there's a space. The pen will go through and poke a hole through the page. Now, if that happens, not a problem, because you should have copies. Swap it out. Don't send back paperwork with holes in it. Do not do that. But if you're aware like I am, I'm always watching how they sign, and I'm always pointing these things out. I'll just, and be careful for that line in the middle of the table. Watch out for that design so you don't poke a hole through the paper. They go, oh, yes, thanks for pointing that out. So that is how this episode got brought up, is just being aware of the tabletop. Notice things like that. Another thing is some people have, these wood tables, and you can feel the grain in the table. There's some type of texture on the table. So as they sign, it's a little bumpy, and their signature gets all out of whack a little bit. So this is where I say, oh, you know what? As I sit down, I say, oh, I notice your table has a really nice texture to it. I'm not blaming the table, so I compliment it. Oh, it has a really nice texture to it. You might want to get maybe a magazine to put underneath. They say, oh, yeah, good point. Or here's another example of where I might say, oh, you know what? Here's your copy. These are copies for you. If you want to use it to sign on, you're welcome to do that. So I give them that option as well. So these are just a couple scenarios and a couple situations of how I handle table situation. If there's textures, if there's lines or designs so they don't poke holes or they have bumpy signatures, or if they don't have a place for us to sign, and I say, hey, we've got this. And sometimes you have to make do with what you can. So a couple things that I keep in my notary bag that helps is a clipboard. A clipboard comes in very handy a lot of times, where I've been in situations where people, they don't have a table. They're just moving in. So maybe we use the counter space. That's a good example that I've used. We just use a counter space to sign the paperwork at. They're in between moving. They don't have furniture yet, or they are really bad hoarders, and there's just those situations where you leave the house and there's not enough hand sanitizer in the world to make you feel clean, not enough Febreze to spray on, rolling your windows down. Sometimes you just leave the house thinking, man, I hope I don't get asked to go to that house again. And it happens. So a lot of times a clipboard is very helpful as a place to just, hey, you know what, we're gonna sign on this. We're gonna make do with what we can. And you'll run into those. If you have a funny or interesting story like that, please go to YouTube and comment. They're fun to read. I like reading them. So go to YouTube and put a comment on this video. Any odd situations you've run across with, or any other tips that you think will help the notary community. That's what this podcast and YouTube is for, is helping us, the notary community. And if you get great tips from it, please subscribe on YouTube and any podcast platform that you like. And I'll talk to you on a new episode next week. Bye.